Hi everyone, this is Laura Clemens, a clinical functional herbalist, and I am here today with another edition of Becoming the Kitchen Witch. Today we are still focusing on women's health in International Women's Month, and I wanted to show everyone how to make suppository molds. So today we're going to do just a soothing, simple suppository that you can use as a lubricant. Again, you can use it for dry tissue. You can use it to help soothe vaginal tissue, and also you can use it as a lubricant with your partner. So this is the end product that what we will be making. These are the molds, and we actually make them out of foil and a little bit of parchment paper. So we have foil and parchment paper. You don't have to use parchment paper to make your mold, but if you don't want the foil to really be touching your suppository, then I recommend that you add parchment paper to your foil. And we'll be making 4 ounces in total of liquid. And what we use is 3 parts of cocoa butter to 1 part of an infused oil. Today we are using calendula infused oil that I made, and that we are using 1 ounce, and we're measuring everything by volume. Not everyone has scales in their home, and so although cocoa butter is our second ingredient that we're going to be using, is solid at room temperature, we are going to still eyeball it by volume, melt it down to a liquid, and add our infused oil, which would then still give us a solid enough suppository, but also add the medicine that we want into it. I know that I've mentioned before, I don't typically use essential oils in anything that we would add to a vaginal suppository or gel, and in this case it's the same. Some people do use dried herb or powdered herb in their vaginal suppositories, or they call them a bolus. And if you do that and you have an active infection and you wanted to use something like that, please make sure that you always add slippery elm bark to your dried herb, because what can happen if, say, you add something like echinacea, powdered echinacea, and echinacea can be a little bit astringent, especially to the tissue, and you already have dry, red, cracked tissue, it's not going to be fun coming out. It'll actually hurt a lot. So adding powdered slippery elm bark to your suppository of dried herbs mixed into this formula, you could do that, would actually help everything to come out, and you would still get the desired result of having that tissue be exposed to the herbal formula that you use. So what we're going to start with is a piece of foil and a wooden spoon, not just for Italian women any longer. And what we do is we actually just wrap this spoon with our foil. So this amount of foil is about 10 inches long. So you are going to be getting about 10 suppositories with this, if it's all filled up nice and even, which we'll show you that in a minute. So you want to wrap your wooden spoon with your foil, and yes, I'm using a little bit of foil here, and that's because I want the mold to be strong. And then we have a seam. And so what we want to do is actually tape the seam. Thank you. And I use packaging tape to tape the seam, because it's a nice strong tape, and typically it's waterproof. So we don't want anything to come out of the seams themselves. So I'll tape the seam, And then at the end here, I pull down just a little and I twist it. And then bend it over. I pull this off and I have my suppository mold. So this is the one that's super easy that you can make just with your foil, your piece of foil. So now, if you want one that's actually lined with parchment paper and it makes it a little more sturdy, you want to get your piece of foil. So this one is not as long as as wide as the one that we made before, but it is just as long. And I get my parchment paper and I go ahead and cover it. And then I'm going to tape it. Again, I'm going to use my tape that we use for packaging, so it's nice and thick. And then you want to pull some pieces off, and then I rip it in half. And you do want to take some pieces off and make sure that you tape directly to the foil itself or it won't stick. And then you go all the way around and you can fold it and tape again. And you can do it along both edges. Until it looks like this. And so it's fully taped. And you want to leave a little bit of your foil sticking out so you can twist the bottom. If you don't twist the bottom enough with this foil and make it nice and tight, it actually won't hold the fluid and it'll leak out a little. No matter what, it's always going to leak out a little. So how we kind of get by that and what we do with that is that we place it in a cup and put it in the freezer as soon as we're done pouring it in. So we have our lined foil, and again we're going to use our spoon, and you want this parchment paper to be on the inside because that is where our mold's going to be. Now it's thicker, a little bit harder to work with, and again you tape it. Now this time you tape the seams, but you are going around the spoon this way because we want to make sure that the tape sticks to itself. Because this parchment paper is so slippery, if you don't get the tape all the way around, it may not stick. So you need the tape to stick to itself. So you go all the way down to the edge, and again, you are twisting the bottom. Turning it. And you can always use a little bit of tape on the bottom to help make it a little more leak-proof. And then another piece. So none of this is perfect, but what this does is gives you the opportunity to make many suppositories for yourself at home for a very little amount. So there we have it, another one. So 1, 2, 3, and we have a fourth too. So we're making 4 ounces and about 10 inches of a 1/4 of an inch thick wooden spoon holds about 1 ounce to 1.5 ounces. And so what you want to do is is gather your materials. So we have our cocoa butter, and you can see that this is a large piece, but it comes off very easy. You can almost shave it. And you want to put it into a container that is heat proof, so a Pyrex. I have this little nifty one right here. And you add your cocoa butter in. And you want to make sure that you put this in a little bit of water in another pot on the stove. So making your own double boiler. So you can see this pot here has some water in it, and I placed it in here, and that's how I went ahead and melted it down. So once you melt it down, you want to melt down to about 3 ounces. And then you want to add 1 ounce of infused oil. So whatever oil that you're using, again, we're using calendula today. Calendula is anti-inflammatory. It's very healing to the skin. And so if you do have some dry, cracked tissue, or if you're needing extra lubrication, you can actually use these suppositories for that. So what happens with these suppositories is that the oil mixed with the cocoa butter, because the cocoa butter is solid at room temperature, will make it a nice soft suppository, but it won't melt directly straight away. So we're also adding a little bit of vitamin E to it. So we add 1 dropperful of vitamin E oil to our mix. And that's what we did here. We added 1 dropperful of vitamin E oil to our mix. All melted down. This is what it looks like. So this is the calendula, cocoa butter, and vitamin E solution all together. And then you pour it into your mold. Now, I don't know if you can see, but there is a little hole in the middle there. But this is totally frozen. I kept it in the freezer and I put it in straight away. Some did leak out a little bit. So again, you can tape it, but I always place them in a cup and put them in the freezer straight away. Now, when you're ready to use them, you want to get yourself some scissors, and I'll show you. So there wasn't very much that was from me pouring, so it's not a full 10 inches. But you can see here's a suppository ready to be used. So I cut off about 1 inch. And I open them up. And so you can see how it a little bit came off. This is the very first one. But again, you can still, this is still usable. It's nice and solid. And you lay down and insert it. And so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 suppositories. So in total. And again, you can cut them, keep them in the wrapper, and then place them back in the freezer in a container or in the refrigerator in a container, and then unwrap them as you need. And there you have it, your suppository molds.